Yes, so guys, here in this video we are going to understand about backend automation. Now let's understand what is backend automation and how does it work. So backend automation is automating test cases of such components who don't have any UI to interact with, right? Say REST API. Let's take an example of REST API. So I have a REST API which does the addition of two numbers. Okay, so that's a REST API is nothing but a function. Let's say addition function someone has written in some language like C# or Java or Python, and they have exposed that function for usage on the HTTP protocol. Okay, so the way we access any web page by giving its address, HTTP address on the browser, I can consume that function, or I can call that function written in certain language by accessing it using its HTTP URL. And the parameters, like usually the functions, like say I have written a function called public int addition int a comma int b, and the logic of it is return a plus b, right? So this function, if I expose this function to be used using its HTTP address, it becomes my REST API. And the advantage of exposing the functions as REST API is the consumer code, like the function which is calling this function and the function which is being called, like here in this case addition, and the consumer would be some other function. So even if these both functions, consumer function or a calling function and this called function, even if they have been written in different languages, we are fine to use them together, right? That is what the REST API or web services allows us. So they are just the reusable components written, or reusable functions, let's say functions written in different languages, and which have been exposed over the web. Like these functions we write in the programs, and those programs we deploy in some Tomcat or some kind of application servers, and then we call them over the HTTP protocol. That is what REST API. Now if I want to test this REST API or the function, how would I test it? I just need to call this function, whatever the HTTP URL is being made available to access this function. I'll just hit that URL. So I'll say HTTP colon, say some domain, and then my application, and then addition. So this is the endpoint, this is the address or the HTTP URL to access it, right? And then I will send in the argument num1 or a equal to 10 and b equal to 20. So this is how the arguments are sent to the REST API, right? So this function needs two parameters to work, right? So two parameters it needs. So how to send them the arguments? Using this is called query string. It's called query string. So using this query string, we send in the arguments to the REST API function. So here in this REST API testing or automation, we need a tool which will trigger the HTTP request to the given endpoint. Now what it will do, it will return the result, but it will return the result in the form of some JSON or XML. Okay, so that JSON and XML we will get the result, and then we will parse that XML or JSON to check whether the returned result from the REST API is correct or not. So here the automation requirement is hugely different than what are the requirements for UI automation. So UI automation tools work on a different principles, where they need to identify the elements we interact with as a part of our testing, whatever the elements from our screen we interact with, so they need to identify those, right? Whereas here the requirement is altogether different. Here the tool requires the capability to send in the HTTP request. After getting the response back, it should have the capability to deserialize the response, and then we also need the capability to parse the JSON or XML in which we have got that response back, so that we can check whether the return is indeed correct or not. Now let's understand the challenges of UI automation. If we say the UI automation has a different challenges than backend. Now let's see what those challenges are. First of all, UI automation is closely tied with your interface of app, meaning even the slight change in the identification, as we had in the previous video, we had discussed about the identification, how does the UI automation tool does the identification and all, right? So even the slightest change in the image of the element, or in the attributes or properties set to that element, or the relationship of that element with the other elements on the screen, our identifications may get invalidated. Our automation tool may no longer be able to identify the elements, and if the automation tool is not able to identify the element, it cannot do anything. So the first and foremost requirement for the UI automation tool is to identify the element to work on, right? So even the slightest change may trigger the the maintenance of your scripts. If the UI design technology, like let's say this particular UI is designed in WPF, Windows Presentation Foundation, one of the interface design technology by Microsoft. So currently it is designed with this, and now if you change your identification, if you change your element, if you change your interface design technology to something else, then also again there would be a maintenance for your application, right? And on the UI side, we have many many interface design technologies like HTML, HTML5, Angular also we have. So Angular also does support the element UI design. Then we have PHP, then we have Value.js and many more, like for the interface design technologies we have many interface design technologies, right? So there are a lot of things here, like there are a lot of chances that your interface design technology may get changed going forward, right? But here in this backend, here the technologies are quite stable, like Java, C# and those Python, they are being used for writing the business logic, right? So here changing of the technology is not that frequent here, right? So this is the main thing. So UI test cases or UI scripts, they are prone for the maintenance problems because of these things, because they are closely tied with the interface of your application. So slight change may invalidate your scripts, right? Now even if this identification, like this elements identification or this elements, let's say the display, if it gets changed, it doesn't make any difference to the manual tester. Manual tester would be able to identify the element, but that's not the case with UI automation tools, guys. They work very closely with the interface. So that's the main challenge what UI automation tool has, right?